Hello, you are live with Attacking Third. Shout out to our YouTube homies in the chat. We are here to chat all about February's wild window. We have to recap the Arnold Clark Cup. We got to chat about all the other tournaments that took place. We got to chat a little bit about some future international window news. We're going to discuss everything. So make sure you subscribe to us, like this video, and drop your thoughts in the chat. You know we love to hear from you. Hello and welcome to Attacking Third, the CBS Sports Soccer Podcast. I'm Sandra Herrera, lead NWSL writer for CBS Sports. Joined today, as always, by my colleague and co-host Lisa Roman, broadcaster and analyst for CBS Sports. On today's show, we're chatting about it all, the entire international window recap with an emphasis on the Arnold Clark Cup, because you know we had to give some love to the Lionesses. They went out and they dominated, and we got to talk about it. So, make sure if you like what you hear to go ahead and leave us a rating and a review on your favorite podcast platform. We're also on YouTube, so hit subscribe right at Attacking Thirds YouTube, youtube.com/Attacking Thirds. Make sure you subscribe so that you get all of our exclusive content, previews, the recaps, the interviews, and everything else right here on A3. Lisa, we are coming off of a little bit of a soccer hangover. We said, you know what? We did 2 live episodes the day prior. There was a bunch of soccer in between. And then we were like, you know what? We have to go again the following morning because there's still so much stuff for us to try to talk about.
There's a lot to talk about. Even last night, we recapped the She Believes Cup as that came to a close. There was the Interconfederation play-in tournament that also happened. There's just like a million moving parts during this February window. And frankly, all of it was incredible football. And it was great to see. I was like hungry for it. I love that you called it a little bit of a soccer hangover. I'm feeling it a little bit this morning. I mean, it's you take the highs with the lows, right? Like yesterday was a day full of highs with so much soccer to watch, literally from morning to night, watching it, talking about it with you. It was fantastic. It was lovely. Today, definitely on a bit of a hangover, dealing with some car troubles, going on 2 weeks without a car, and that's not great. Really smiling through the pain on that one. Shout out to Vinny, my main man in South Philly,
Gotta laugh
fixing it
so
up
you
for
don't
me.
cry.
Gotta laugh so you don't cry. So come on, Vinny, my South Philly auto body man. Like, let's go. But we're happy to be here. Just letting people know a little bit about what's going on with Lisa right now. Why I've been up all day.
We gotta let them know. Like, if there's gonna be a couple moments on this episode where we're like, it would trail off. You got to keep it real. It's because the soccer hangover is real. There was so much of it that took place over the course of the last 7 to 10 days, really. But a lot of these matches have ended. These tournaments have ended. The window is officially closed. But we're already looking ahead to the next window. United States women's national team lift the She Believes Cup for a 6th time, a 4th consecutive time. And this following morning already announced their next friendlies for the April window. We chatted a little bit about it in our recap of the She Believes Cup just last night. But now it's the official news released by U.S. Soccer. We had seen some reports coming out of Ireland and then confirmed by some reporters stateside. But now it's official. There will be a 2-game series against Ireland and the United States. Going to take place on home soil. First match is going to take place in Austin, Texas. And then they're going to go ahead and close out the para friendlies in St. Louis, Missouri. And I got to say, when I saw that, I was kind of excited about it because if this is just getting announced right off of that She Believes Cup win, there was a special moment during that game where we all thought, is this it? Is Becky Sauerbrunn going to get a goal? Didn't happen despite it being so close. But when I saw this announcement drop, which was literally minutes ago, my first reaction was like St. Louis, Missouri. So the whole game plan is going to be to make sure that Becky Sauerbrunn gets a goal in her hometown, right? Like that's what it's going to be.
Get Becky Sauerbrunn a goal. I know she was close in the She Believes Cup in that final game against Brazil. I think everyone collectively held their breath during that moment in the stadium watching from home. I mean, this is really exciting. This is a friendly situation, right? The United States only has so many opportunities to play against competition before heading into the World Cup. We saw that during She Believes. There was 2 friendlies in New Zealand in January that happened, and now this April window. And that's really it before they head to the World Cup, or rather before the World Cup roster is named, because I'm sure once the roster is named, they might do a send-off series, play 1 or 2 more friendlies. But this is the final set of pair of games before Vlatko Andonovski has to name his World Cup roster. And it's happening in April, as you mentioned, on the 8th and then on the 11th. So a Saturday and a Tuesday. And it's against the Republic of Ireland. And I'm a little bit partial to the Republic of Ireland because I am Irish. I mean, I am. I like it there. I like to visit Ireland a lot. And they're debutantes in the World Cup. And
Do it, Lisa. Rep your set. You're rocking the green today.
I am, not even on purpose, but I'm really excited about this. Like I really am, because this is an Irish side, an Irish Republic team that's debutantes in the World Cup. So they have qualified for their first ever World Cup, and for them to play up against 2-time World Cup champions in the United States before heading to the World Cup is the best competition that Ireland could ask for. Yeah. I think, honestly, this benefits Ireland more than it benefits the United States.
Yeah.
Just in terms of competition and kind of how things are going to play out and kind of work like that. But for Ireland to qualify and everything, they finished second in UEFA qualifying Group A. They were behind Sweden, and they played Scotland, which is a big-time rival, in a World Cup playoff game. And that there was 1 goal, but I mean, lots of back and forth for that team. I'm excited for this. I'm really excited for Ireland and to kind of get a taste of what they're going to bring to the World Cup. And I think for Vlatko Andonovski, it's going to be more of, and for the US, of like double checking almost. Like, these are the right players. This is the right formation. This is what we're doing.
I mean, I'm with you 100%. I think when you see an announcement like this, you start sort of running through the different scenarios. And yeah, with you in that this is going to be a set of friendlies that absolutely is beneficial for Ireland. I do appreciate in the announcement, in the release, that they specifically state that these friendlies are going to be the last official friendlies before Andonovski finalizes the World Cup roster. So that's not to say that the World Cup roster is going to be named immediately following this pair of friendlies. There's still going to probably be an extensive window of time where NWSL play is taken into consideration, I would imagine. And we probably get the announcement of a roster ahead of the June window that may come for the next set of friendlies after April. But you know what? I still think that there are things within it, that the coaching staff and the players will want to utilize to their benefit in preparations for the World Cup. Yes, they're debutantes, and a lot of times that comes with a certain amount of pressure as you go as one of those teams in the World Cup. I mean, they're one of 8 teams who are going to make their first ever appearance in the World Cup. It's them, Philippines, I believe Vietnam, Haiti, Panama, Portugal, right? We just saw these teams qualify through the Interconfederation playoff, but I don't want to say that they're like, with that comes, people might think that there's inexperience there. I mean, they're coming off of a pretty impressive 2022. I mean, undefeated essentially. And they've got some good results, early on. We're talking like almost a year ago with like a 1-1 draw against Sweden during the FIFA World Cup qualifiers, but results against the Philippines, another team that's going to be debutantes, wins against Finland. Scotland was the big one that got them through to the World Cup, and they closed out their year with a 4-0 win against Morocco, another team that's going to be debutantes in the World Cup. So on a literal undefeated streak.
Yes, they are.
Kind of going into 2023, and just out of their recent window, 0-0 against China. So
like these are big games too, right? Yeah. Like I think when you look at the history of kind of who they have played against, honestly, like the 1-1 against Sweden about a year ago in the April window last year in 2022, like that's a great scoreline. 0-0 against
Sweden.
Yeah. I
They're
know.
not afraid of playing on the road. I'm like, I kind of like that about this Irish team. Like,
I know they're a bit gritty, and for NWSL fans, I mean, for the biggest name that you would know, Denise O'Sullivan out of
yeah,
North Carolina, captain for the Courage this year, captain for Republic of Ireland. This is a midfielder that can just dominate, a defensive midfielder
yeah,
that's really all over the place, and I really like watching Denise O'Sullivan play. So, like,
yeah.
again, I'm a little bit partial to Ireland here, just
Yeah,
for
yeah, no,
funsies.
I mean, listen, she's a champion, right? In this league, she's won time and time again. I mean, for folks who are, who keep a closer eye on maybe Women's Super League versus like NWSL. I mean, obviously going to be familiar with Katie McCabe, and she's
Yep.
someone who's been with Arsenal for a while, and obviously with this Ireland team as well. So I think there will be some interesting things to come out of it.
Yeah, I mean, also shout out if we're giving shout outs to player here, I have to shout out Marissa Shiva, she was like a discovery player for
Yeah,
Washington Spirit last year. She ends up signing a contract at the end of the year for Chris Ward last year. She then in the offseason signed another contract with Washington Spirit. So she's in the NWSL. I played with her growing up and played with her sister and her family. And she recently got her citizenship and made the Republic of Ireland national team. And she was on this most recent trip with the Irish national team to Spain to play against China. So shout out to Marissa Shiva for sure.
I'm saying you got to rep your set. Yeah, no, 100%. I love that. Definitely players repping NWSL, women's Super League as well. Yeah, talking about Katie McCabe, their goalkeeper, and Courtney Brown is
Yeah.
playing with Everton. Like, you can go through this roster and you could see a lot of Ireland's players, and they're playing in top flight leagues. So a lot of good individual pieces. I think it's just about trying to see how they can get things together in the build up to the World Cup. So exciting news to sort of already have on the calendar and take note of for April for the United States women's national team. Again, that's going to be April 8th and April 11th. We're talking just like a couple weeks or so after the NWSL season kicks
Yeah.
off on March 25th. It's NWSL preseason still, but we're inching closer and closer and closer to the start of the regular season. Houston dropping their kit. We're going to start seeing the kit fashion roll out a little bit. Houston dropping their Estrella kit. Love the iconic orange, loving the
Yeah.
black shorts to go with it as well. So that's very cool. But another bit of NWSL news that we wanted to chat a little bit about before we finally turn the page on the FIFA international window here is the sort of the reported kind of rumor out there right now about NWSL entertaining conversations about the possibility of a fall to spring schedule and how that could maybe benefit kind of getting alongside the global calendar. I don't know. I mean, first reactions when you saw this, I'll be frank, when I saw it, I was kind of like, well, global warming is going to probably change
Yeah.
that much quicker than we think.
Yeah, I mean,
How
I
are we going to
think,
do this?
like, we don't live in a bubble. That's why I wanted to talk about it. I threw in the rundown and we were kind of like, are we talking about this? Yeah, we're talking about this because
Yeah.
it's rumored, it's out there. The conversations are flying about if the NWSL should switch because right now, as we all know, it starts in March and it goes until late October, November, playing throughout the summer, which is very unusual, right? In all other sports, right? Even across the football landscape, but even you look at American sports, also like there's no other sports that happen in the summer except like baseball. That's about it. And I love baseball. I worked in baseball for years, but it's just like a very different kind of energy that you're getting from this NWSL team and kind of what could happen with it. And when you look at the FIFA international schedule and the European soccer schedule, they are on this fall to spring schedule. They play throughout the winter. And that's why so often when there are FIFA windows, it really messes up, I'm going to say so and so, the NWSL schedule with players leaving. Even you look at the World Cup happening in the middle of our NWSL season. And that's because we are the only league in the NWSL that plays like this that plays like a spring to fall schedule. Now, yes, if we lived in a bubble, I think it would make sense for the whole world to be on the same schedule. It would change things a little bit with like loans and how trades work and everything like that. It would be a bit of a trickle down effect. The FIFA international window, it would be all on the same page. But that doesn't work. You cannot play at Red Bull Arena in North Jersey where Gotham plays their home games. You can't play in Chicago. You can't play in Portland or Seattle in December and January and February. I'm sorry, it just doesn't work like that.
Look, I don't have much more to add. I'm just nodding my head like, yeah, I am in agreement with you. I mean, look, Texas gets ice storms now. Like, that's a thing that happens. One of the things that came out of She Believes Cup was joy in the weather in Frisco, because just a year ago they were talking about how freezing it was. That's like a thing that just happens.
I mean, Black Malinovsky even talked about that. He was like, last year, the She Believes Cup, we were shivering, and now we're in our shorts and t-shirts because they played a little farther south. But it just doesn't make sense logistically because it's an outdoor sport. And even like we look at the Women's Super League, right? Over the last couple of months, they have had games that have been canceled and postponed due to a frozen pitch.
Yeah. Look, multiple games. I feel like when some of the episodes where we are, finding ourselves recapping Women's Super League, part of that has been talking about the games getting canceled or postponed or rescheduled. So listen, I also sort of feel like a little bit of deja vu in this. I feel like this is not something that has been sort of thrown out there just to see what'll stick. I feel like this isn't the first time that we've sort of, heard that the league might want to entertain a shift in schedule, et cetera, et cetera. Especially as the league continues to expand, really. So, it's just the geographic makeup of the United States is just different when you're talking about professional leagues in other countries. Like the commute and travel within England for Women's Super League is far different than traveling across the United States. Navigating and scheduling and traveling for the country of Spain is far different than navigating and scheduling travel for the vast United States. It's just different.
And I'm going to be honest, there are other factors that come into it. Like, there is American football in the United States that makes a lot of money for networks, for stadiums, for cities, whatever it may be, whether it's college football or NFL. I mean, even you look at like the scheduling for the NWSL final in years past. Like, I mean, it was on CBS primetime last year, but it also didn't fall on a football Saturday. Like, there are just so many different factors that come into it. And I think it would be naive of us not to consider that. Like, right now, NFL makes way more money than the NWSL, and money is a factor that comes into it. So, of course, you're going to play a league in a season that there aren't as many other conflicts, because that generates fans, that generates people going to games. Actually, you're also going to get a lot more people going to games if it's in North Jersey in August and July versus December, January, February.
I'm with you. I look. It came up. We wanted to chat about it a little bit. We brought it to the episode. I'm with you. It's something that we'll obviously have to keep an eye on as the season continues, as the league continues to expand. But I think there's a lot more. I'm not even going to like nail it down to pros and cons. I just think there's a lot more obstacles and challenges in trying to find yourself as a growing league to pivot to that type of schedule. So we will see. But we want to chat about results. We want to talk about results. We want to talk about finite things. So we're going to talk about things that are accomplished, done, dusted. That's a wrap. We got to chat about the Arnold Clark Cup. We got to chat about the Mexican Revelations Cup. We got to chat about Cup of Nations, Pinatar Cup, Tenor de France. Look, there's so many things that we got to talk about. So we got to hop to it, and we'll be back right after a quick break. So stick with us.
We're really breaking through, and we're opening doors for the next generation.
If you see someone who looks like you doing things out of the ordinary, it would encourage you that you can do the same thing or better.
Someone at some point might feel inspired just by the existence of these stories.
You can't always do what you're told.
Now we get to be in places of authority. Now I get to be a captain. Let's fly.
All right, let's chat all about the Arnold Clark Cup. England winning the Arnold Clark Cup for the second consecutive year in a row. Its second year in existence, undefeated. There's only one Arnold Clark champion, and it is the Lionesses. Let's chat all about it.
Arnold Clark is a car company, right?
No, it is a used car company.
Thank you for the clarification,
Yes.
Sandra. That's why we have you here, to double check anything that randomly comes out of my mouth.
Look, I was thinking about it, and I was just like, is there like an American like comparison that we can try to, give to our listeners, and perhaps
Auto lenders?
maybe like auto lender, or like even maybe like CarMax, perhaps, like or
Carvana. What's the ones that's like car elevators? Is that Carvana?
is that Carvana? Oh God, could you imagine the Carvana Cup? That's wild. Anyway, Arnold Clark Cup. England Lioness is winning this one, and in triumphant fashion, entering the final match day. Belgium, really excited about that team. When we were going through the preview of Arnold Clark Cup initially, we talked a little bit about the four teams that were going to be involved in this tournament. Obvious that England were going to be the favorites in this one. We both agreed on that. We were looking for South Korea to maybe come out here and kind of be the X factor. But kudos to Belgium for running this tournament and really going out there and playing spoiler, essentially, and having a good tournament that led all the way up to a final match day scenario where it was kind of like a winner takes all kind of energy in this one. And because of that, it's almost like England said, we are going to really put a stamp on it and put this one away. 6-1 the scoreline in this final match against Belgium. I mean, England, best team in the world right now, Lisa. What do you think?
I am incredibly impressed with England right now. I think that, dubbing them best team in the world right now might be, it's not too far of a stretch by any means. Just considering what this team has done, the consistency that they've been on over the last year, even last 6 months, winning the Euros and then this Arnold Clark Cup. They didn't just win the Arnold Clark Cup. They dominated and destroyed. When you look at the score lines, right? Opening day, it was 4-0 win for England over South Korea. Then they concede a goal in the second match day to Italy, but they still win 2-1. They also conceded against Belgium and in the final match day, and holy cow, what a screamer of a goal. But they score 6 goals in this final match against Belgium, and they end up winning 6-1. 12 goals in 3 games for this English side. Unbelievable. They get 1 shutout. They concede 2 goals. I think what Serena Wigman, the manager with the Lionesses right now, is doing is creating this culture of undeniable confidence and like in a pressureless system and situation for this team, which is allowing them to succeed as much as they are. I mean, they've got a lot of young players coming into this roster as well. They're dealing with injury. They've had to rotate some players in. And you've got a Lauren James who's earning her 8th cap in the start against Belgium in this final. Heck yeah, Lauren James. I want to watch this player play week in and week out. Good thing you can. But it is so fun to watch this England team right now.
I love the shot there. Listen, you could catch Women's Super League games on CBS Sports platforms, whether it's CBS Sports Network or the Women's Super League. So make sure you tune in and check out the schedule. Lauren James, one of the players that we were really excited about leading into this World Cup. I think in the preview, I labeled her as England's most like exciting player right now. And you could sort of see that reflected in some of these games. I felt like the energy coming out of these stadiums, like every time Lauren James was on the ball, took a touch or took a shot, like you could just like feel the enthusiasm from the crowd around this player. And it's just so wild to sort of just think that she's only got, X amount of caps, in her career for right now. Thank you, 8. But great to see her kind of having this resurgence kind of post, injury. She's had to navigate some things through her career. And it's also great to see that transition, right? From club play to international stage. to see that there's no real lapse in that
And she's
player like her.
21 years old. She is 21 years old, incredibly young. Yeah, I mean, England really going on a tear. And we talked about this with Ireland a little bit. The year that these nations had in 2022, I think really started to be the buildup, right? Because at the start of 2022, every nation knew, okay, we've got the World Cup in 1 year. What are we going to do? England went undefeated throughout 2022 in their competition, right? They beat the United States 2-1. Everyone that's a US fan remembers that game very, very well in London. But this is a team that's now continued to be undefeated since their World Cup qualifying in April of last year. This is a team that's going on run after run. They're also putting up incredible score lines, right? We talked about the 12 goals that they just had in this Arnold Clark Cup, but when you look back at their 2022, they had a couple 10-0 score lines. Yeah, one against North Macedonia, one against Luxembourg, but I don't think like the Americans have done that too, but I think it's the way that England is doing it, right? They've got a lot of balanced scoring. They've got really impressive mindset. They've got this gritty blue collar work rate about this English side that is kind of like, we've got a chip on our shoulder to prove the world wrong, that we are the best in the world. And honestly, watching this Arnold Clark Cup, I was like pretty jazzed, a little nervous for the World Cup.
I mean, they're playing with swag right now, man.
Totally.
And that's really, I mean, that's really, it's so cool to see, honestly, because this is an England program that has had talent on it for numerous cycles at this point. And you could just sort of, it's a really good example of what having the right coach at the right time can do for a program. And watching these players thrive under Serena Wigman and really respond to her rotations as well, I think is really, really cool. Sometimes when you try to mix things up, it could, ruffle feathers in the locker room. But I think it's important
They're
to
all
know that
bought
within,
in. They're all bought in,
and it's important to know within each of these games that it's great that you mentioned balanced goal scoring, because the amount, the different goal scorers in each of these games, I think, is also what stands out to me. Even if it's that first game against South Korea, whether Stanway, Kelly, Russo, James, all like 4 different goal scorers for each of the 4 goals against that opening match in South Korea. Rachel Daly, the lone goal scorer against Italy in the 2-1 scoreline there, and then you've got this massive scoreline 6-1 against Belgium, where it's Williamson with a couple of goals. Kelly gets on the board with a couple of goals again. They force an own goal, and Lucy Bronze joins the party as well. So it's like that is also just so strong when you're looking at this England team moving forward. It's like, yes, can you look at some of the top teams right now and pluck out certain storylines? Yes, you can. One of those with the United States is the fact that Mallory Swanson is on this incredible goal scoring pair right now, right? Mallory Swanson, 1 of 1. And then you're looking at this tournament in Arnold Clark Cup, and you're looking at everybody joining the goal scoring party. It's impressive.
It is so impressive. I mean, yeah, the balance scoring for sure, but also if you go back and watch, plug for Attacking Third YouTube right now, because we have all the Arnold Clark Cup highlights. Watch those highlights of England versus Belgium, because yes, there were 6 goal scorers. Yes, there was a lot of different goal scorers actually in that game for England, but the quality of the goals and the variety of how the goals were scored were very impressive. Crosses coming in from the box, and they even forced an own goal for Belgium, and heading into the halftime, it was 2-0 for England going up, and they end up getting 4 more in the second half, one of those being forced an own goal, and they also give up a goal, but a really well-deserved goal to give up. Like, kudos to Belgium for knocking that screamer down. I also think it's important to give a shout out to the Belgian goalkeeper, Nikki Evard, who was in this match, because this player played lights out. Holy cow, 6 saves for Nikki during this game, as she, by like the 40th minute, the 50th minute, she was like covered in grass stains. Her jersey was completely destroyed with how much effort she was putting out, how many acrobatic saves she was being forced to make that England was forcing her to make. I think it was really impressive to watch that side of it too. I mean, for her to, you let up 6 goals and that's not great, especially one of them being an own goal, but it very easily could have been like 8 or 9.
It's hard. It's hard. It's tough to think about, really. The scoreline's already as lopsided as it is, and then to sort of imagine that it could actually have been 7 or 8 or 9 at some point. But England, honestly, this was just a reminder, I think, of who they are and what they can be in the World Cup. For the other teams, I think a great showing for Belgium. I would like to sort of see where they go next with this. I think they've got great young pieces and good talent, but they are not World Cup bound. So it's going to be interesting to see how they continue to navigate not just the remaining international windows this year, but really this next duration of the cycle moving forward. They have to make sure that they don't lose pace, right, with what they've
exactly
started to build with this team. Italy and South Korea, 2 teams that are going to the World Cup. South Korea struggled in this match. Maybe a big part of it was due to the fact that there's a lot of players in preseason form. But I think they're going to take a lot away from this and try to wrap things up a little bit differently in those April windows. See how they perform after they get a little bit more soccer under their legs.
I mean, for Italy, it's a team going to the World Cup. They're playing Colombia in this April friendly. But when you look at the group that Italy is in for the World Cup, Argentina, Sweden, South Africa. That's rough. They start off playing Argentina on the 24th, and then July 29th, they play Sweden. That's just, it's going to be tough. It's going to be an uphill battle for Italy in the World Cup.
Yeah, for sure. But it was great. It was great to have the Arnold Clark Cup make its return and visit. We'll see them again, and I'm sure England will be favorites once more. Congratulations to the Lionesses for reminding everyone who they are. We'll keep an eye on their April window as well. They are going to, I think, face off against, I don't remember at this moment. I'm so sorry. I know a lot of teams right now are announcing their April windows. I know we talked about United States and Ireland, and then we chatted a little bit about Australia, and then we chatted a little bit about France and Canada.
England is going to play against Brazil and Australia.
Yikerton. Australia 1 game, and then Brazil 1 game. Yeah. You'll love to see it.
Yikes.
I'm curious as to what that scoreline is going to look like. If they're ending off Arnold Clark Cup 6-1 against Belgium, I'm a little curious of what that's going to look like or could look like against an Australian side. And we'll talk a little bit about why, because there are more tournaments that we have to recap for you all. So stick around. We'll be back after a quick break.
Let's go. You can feel the madness.
Okay, let's touch a little bit on some of the other kind of round robin style tournaments that took place during February's wild window. Let's start with the co-host. Let's talk a little bit about Australia and how they fared in the Cup of Nations. Newsflash, they won. They went up against, they hosted a tournament in Australia against Spain. They invited Jamaica as well. And so we're looking at some of the fixtures between all four of these teams ahead of the World Cup. It's a little bit of a trial run, right? Because for Australia, they're going to be the host in this one. And I think with that comes a certain amount of pressure, as the co-host. You want to perform well, for your country. But I think for this window of players, right, in Australia, it almost sort of feels like maybe this could be the moment, that this is the window of time where they really want to try and make a run, because there have been previous occasions where this Matilda's side is found themselves participating in international competition and have ended on a disappointed note, whether it's been exiting group stages or exiting early first editions of the knockout rounds. So they get a chance to take a look at Spain and Jamaica, who are two other teams that are going to the World Cup, and they get a look at Czech Republic, pretty difficult and stubborn European side to play against for sure. But opened up this tournament with a 4-0 win against Czech Republic, and then defeated Spain 3-2 on their second match day, and wrapped up this tournament with a 3-0 win against Jamaica. So I think, look, the one that stands out, I think if you're looking at all these, probably that 3-2 game against Spain. We're talking a little bit about England and how you have different goal scorers sort of stepping up and making a point. And it looked like for Australia, it mirrored a little bit of similarity there. From game to game, you had different goal scorers in each game.
No, it's definitely a positive for Australia coming out of this. I mean, this was a big tournament for them to be able to host this. It was the second time that the Cup of Nations was happening with a couple years gap in between. And yeah, I think there is a lot of pressure on Australia that their country's putting on them, maybe that the world is even putting on them, and probably that they're putting on themselves a little bit. And they have to try to balance that. I think they've done a nice job preparing themselves for this World Cup with all the different international friendlies that they've been able to host. And I think that the country in itself, right, is doing a good job of that. I mean, yeah, we have to look at that 3-2 win over Spain, because this is an Australian team that in the first day won 4-0 over Czech Republic, a stubborn Czech Republic team, as you mentioned. And that was a dominant win. That was a great win. 3 goal scorers on 4 goals, pretty spread out as well. They started really fast against Spain in this second match day. It was quick. They were on the front foot. They put Spain on their heels to start this game. And before you know it, heading into the halftime, Australia is up 3-0 over this Spanish side. And this is what worries me about this Australian side. That's what worries me. They went up 3-0 against Spain after a really consistent first game against Czech Republic, and then they conceded 2 goals to Spain. Spain was climbing back into it. Spain did not give up. They wanted to fight. They wanted to win this game, and Australia let their guard down a little bit. Spain comes back in the 73rd minute, and then in the end of the game, stoppage time, end up scoring the second goal. But that's a little too close for comfort for me. I mean, scoreline says a lot about games, but I think you have to really watch it and see how the game unfolds to understand the flow of it and how it happened. And I was worried for Australia during this game.
Look, I think with this match in particular, you've got 2 fairly high-ranked teams going head-to-head, both headed to the World Cup as well. And the timing in which these goals came, I think, is important, as you noted, because they were later in the second half, whether it was Carmona's goal in the 73rd minute or a 94th stoppage time minute goal. That could come back and haunt you in a World Cup, So they got out of it.
That's how you lose games in the World Cup, if you're not willing to defend until the very last second. I mean, we can even relate this to the Americans game that they just played, United States in the She Believes Cup against Brazil. The final minutes, Brazil is doing everything they can to get on board and get a goal, and the United States is in a low block. They're defending. They're getting everything out. They've dropped Taylor Korniak between the center backs, the tallest field player, just so anything that comes in over the top off a set piece, off a corner kick, Korniak can head it out and get on the end of it. It's that, and that's the little bite that Australia didn't have at the end of that Spain game.
I think it's frustrating too, as like, again, I'm talking about this current roster of players. These are all players who've played together for quite some time. I mean, Sam Kerr representing her nation since she was like a teenager, and it's just kind of like this sort of has been a part of the team's reputation, I guess, for lack of a better word. This sort of these defensive breakdowns that you see from time to time from the Matildas, kind of coming to light, and often coming to light in this manner later in games or against other top opposition. So they end up the winners, though. I think they were the only team in this competition to have all 3 wins, and collect all of the 9 points. And it was like, you know what? Listen, I think it was just cool to just even have the tournament of nations back, right?
I
This is
agree.
one of those tournaments. When we were previewing this window, we talked about how this tournament was making its return, that we saw this window of kind of tournament be affected by the ongoing pandemic. Right at its peak, they put a pause on it, and there was no tournament of nations for a couple of years. I mean, it made its return, I think, in like they said that was one of the things that it was making its return in 4 years. So the fact that they've cranked this back up again, I think, is a big win in general for the federation. The fact that they cranked this back up and hosted it, and they're on their way to being co-host of the World Cup, I thought was very important. And I think every window and every minute within these matches is going to count, especially for these World Cup bound teams.
And we just talked about it with jumping off of the Arnold Clark Cup in England and looking ahead to this April window ahead. Australia is going to play against England in England, and I think that'll be an interesting test for both sides, because
listen.
Australia is going to have to defend.
All goal scoring, no defense from 5.
I mean, neither side.
I want to see the 5-4 scoreline. Give it to me, England.
That's what it'll be. Honestly, it could even be more than 5-4. The way that the clip that England's scoring right now, and the lack of defensive integrity that Australia has right now, it could be wide open, and you get Sam Kerr on a run for Australia. Bam, bam, bam. Before you know it, it's 6-4.
Absolutely. Shout out to the Pinatar Cup. Iceland coming out the winners in that one, with Wales, Scotland, and Philippines. Unfortunately, Philippines, the debutantes, one of the 8 debutantes who will go to the World Cup, exiting this round robin tournament without a win. Iceland claiming the Pinatar Cup in that one. Tournoi de France going to France. Maybe a little bit of a shocker there. There were some narrow score lines in this one against Denmark. Uruguay was also participating in this tournament with France, along with Norway. But France just sort of edging things out in the group there with 7 points and walking away the winners for Tournoi de France. But we also wanted to chat a little bit about the Revelations Cup, because that was one of the tournaments that we had previewed coming up in this February window. And it was very unique because it was the first edition. The Revelations Cup is typically a U20 tournament for the men, and the Mexican Federation introduced the concept of having one specifically for their senior women's national team. So this was the first ever Revelations Cup for the senior women's national team. They played the host. It took place in León, Guanajuato. Shout out to the motherland. And they went ahead and they invited Nigeria, Colombia, and Costa Rica in this one. And when we were previewing this, Lisa, we were kind of excited about it because this was going to be one of those round robin tournaments that had multiple World Cup bound teams. So while we were really hyped on She Believes Cup because every single team, all 4 of them, were World Cup qualified, there were a couple other tournaments that might have only had 2 or 3, and the Mexican Revelations Cup was one of those tournaments that had 3 nations headed to the World Cup. Mexico, not one of them, though. So going through this tournament, we made a little preview and we were looking at the teams involved, and we both thought that Colombia was maybe going to be most primed to give an upset in this tournament. And similar to She Believes Cup or Arnold Clark Cup or even Cup of Nations for Australia, this was another tournament that came down to a final match day. Mexico and Colombia had to kind of battle it out and see who was going to lift the first ever Revelations Cup. So another tournament with some narrow score lines. Mexico defeating Nigeria in their opening game. Mexico going on to a 1-1 draw against the CONCACAF rivals in Costa Rica. And then this final match day also getting another draw against Colombia. And it ended up being tiebreakers had to come into play for this one. So goal differential and ultimately the fair play came into consideration when naming the winner of this tournament. It ended up being that Mexico actually had fewer yellow cards in the final standings, even though Colombia and Mexico ended with the same amount of points. So they both had the same +1 goal differential. They had to go to fair play. And turns out fouling less and earning less yellow cards means the difference in
Talk about a tiebreaker.
lifting a trophy. But
yeah, at least it didn't come down to a coin flip, because I just hate that. But yeah, I mean, talk about narrow score lines. You mentioned that in the Pintar Cup, but this one, all 1-goal games, if not draws for this Revelations Cup. I think the competition really, really tight. Talk about defending, right? Like we go from one side of the coin to the other with England, Australia, and now you're looking at these nations: Mexico, Costa Rica, Colombia, Nigeria. They're putting their bodies on the line every single play to keep the ball out of the back of the net for their opponents. It was fun to watch. I was a little disappointed in Colombia throughout this as well. I mean, I know that you're, of course, partial to Mexico. I just really think going into this one, Colombia was going to give a little bit more. A 1-1 draw against Costa Rica. They end up winning 1-0 over Nigeria, and then they draw with Mexico on the final match day, 1-1. I don't know, a little intriguing.
Listen, I'm with you. I had them picked as well. I said, I think Colombia is going to come in here and maybe, disrupt some things and walk away with it. And watching this sort of tightly contested battle between the two teams, it was just like really kind of it's uncomfortable at times, just because of how close it was. I mean, you had 2 goals come in the first half, and then it just was almost like there were stretches where neither team wanted to make that mistake or really go after it. So it was just kind of like, well, this is how it's going to end. And yeah, that is actually how it ended. It came down to yellow cards, just because of the split points between these two teams. But Nigeria, Costa Rica, Colombia, each getting looks against each other as well in their preparations for the World Cup. Just like everyone else, they've got minor windows remaining to have precious time together in the build-up to the World Cup. And I am partial to Mexico. I've been waiting for Mexico to get back into World Cup since 2015. And you and I covered that epic summer of soccer, and you saw it firsthand. I was gutted. I was devastated. I was sad, man. When Mexico weren't able to do the thing for like a second consecutive qualifier.
Yeah. I think it's shocking and sad. I mean, sad. I'm going to be honest. It's sad. I feel for Mexico. I feel for you. I would have loved to see Mexico in this World Cup, and to think that now there are 6 CONCACAF nations playing in the World Cup, and the fact that Mexico is not one of them is you couldn't have guessed that a year ago.
It's so like interesting. It was so interesting sort of watching the Revelations Cup adjacent to like everything else that was happening. I mean, we saw Haiti and Panama clinch spots in the World Cup. They made it not 4, not 5, but 6 CONCACAF nations that are going to be represented in Australia and New Zealand. And that's sort of where I'm putting my joy right now. Like I'm so in for CONCACAF in this 2023 World Cup. And then there's that other side of me that's like, and that meant that Mexico was what it cost. It's just like, so it can be discouraging, but I think similar to Belgium and watching how they navigated the Arnold Clark Cup, I don't want the federation to continue to lose the momentum and ignore the strides that this team has made. Part of the Mexican women's national team trying to make a return to a World Cup has been an ongoing process through 2 cycles. That's included the launch of a women's domestic professional league, that has included the return of players to Mexico. We're talking about players who represented Mexico in 2015 and are now back and playing in Liga MX Femenil in an effort to crack through to the women's national team once more, and then possibly go to another World Cup, whether it's somebody like a Steph Mayor or a Bianca Sierra. I mean, Charlene Corral is back and playing with Pachuca. So I just am like, there's just so many different moving parts for Mexico in their eventual journey back to a World Cup. And apparently a big part of that story is going to be competing against World Cup bound teams.
Yeah.
And them staying at home and watching that and sort
I
of
think it was important they stayed at home for this friendly. I really do, because but as you said, they need to I don't want anyone to lose faith in them. Like, I don't want their federation to not allocate enough funds anymore, right? Like, that's such a conversation right now of allocating the funds for these national teams. And this is a side that is doing a lot, right? You talked about Liga MX Femenil and the growth of that league and how much, believe me, it will not be long before Mexico is back in the World Cup, back on top of things.
I think the fact that this tournament, that they created, that they included them, that it even exists, is a huge turning point and a huge signal to that they want to continue, the development of the program. So I think them going out there and ending out this inaugural event with a win as title holders, I think is also equally important. So felicidades and congrats to Mexico for lifting the inaugural Revelations Cup. We will hopefully continue to get to see their journey along the way through this cycle and how that looks. But an exciting time during this February window. It might have answered a lot of questions for folks out there around a lot of different national teams. And we will see what happens in April, because just like the United States, for many teams, it might be the last window of games before we start to see these official FIFA World Cup rosters dropped. We'll keep an eye on that as they come through. That's all we've got for today, though. We hardly knew you, February Wild Window. We can't wait to see you once again. Thank you all so much.
Wait, before we go, we have to tease something, Sandra. We have a special announcement coming, a special surprise. What do we call it? I don't know, but I'm excited for it. So stay tuned, everyone.
We want everyone to make sure that in the next few days, it's really just like days away. Days away.
We wouldn't tease something and make it like months away. No, we're talking days here.
Yeah. Days. So just stay tuned. Next time we go live, we may or may not have a different look, and we'll just say it like that. We'll just leave it like that. Okay. We'll let you marinate on that. We'll let it sizzle for you, and make sure you are subscribed to our channel so that you don't miss it. So that you don't miss it. Because listen, we appreciate you all as always for joining us along on our live shows. Make sure that you download, follow, listen to us anywhere you get your podcast. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube, youtube.com/attacking third, so that you don't miss out on all the action and all the content that we provide on A3. We'll be back. Stay tuned. For Sandra Herrera and Lisa Roman, this was Attacking Third.